Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Pamela Walker, the head of Life Sciences at Gate 1 and host of our Life Sciences in the Spotlight podcast series. Over the past 5 years, we have seen a boom in the emergence of dynamic biotechs, adopting the best from pharma, both science and people. Today's biotechs are commercial, agile, and innovative. And that is precisely why I'm thrilled to be discussing the new era of the biotech with none other than Stefan König. Previously the vice president and general manager of the global IBD franchise for Takeda Pharmaceuticals, which is where we met, Stefan is now the CEO of George Medicines. He is an inspirational leader and a forward-thinking life sciences expert. Welcome, Stefan.
I'm pleased to be here, Pamela. Thank you for having me.
Well, so shall we dive right in? I have so many questions for you. But first, maybe you could share with us what it's been like moving from big pharma to biotech, and how are the organizations set up and operating differently? And I would especially love to hear about how they're leveraging technology. So over to you, Stefan.
So, of course, as you would imagine, moving from a very big organization to a very small organization, it is vastly different. I mean, it's not only just the structure and the size, and with that comes the ways of operating, but it is really all centered around the resources that you have available. In smaller organizations, it's not always possible to think best in class, but you oftentimes have to take a very pragmatic approach and a very pragmatic stance at things that still may be in pockets best in class, but it's vastly different than sort of always trying to be at the forefront of innovation. Sometimes, a good enough is just standard of class rather than being best of class. I'd say the other two things are just learning to live with high levels of ambiguity and uncertainty, as many of these small organizations and biotechs are venture capital financed. This also means you have a certain cash runway, then you need to ensure that you're getting another set of funds in place. You really need to achieve your milestones. I mean, there's just no excuse in not hitting your milestones. It's really challenging in terms of building investor confidence when you're not achieving a milestone. That does undermine your confidence levels. As you can tell, being the CEO of such a small biotech organization, it's constantly about ensuring you have your finances mapped out and you have your investors backing you, and you're adequately getting a leeway of what your plans are and getting that out to investors and ensuring people adequately support you. It's all about, I guess, resourcing the organization carefully and building on and building new strong networks of external vendors, advisory firms. So since I joined, a small biotech, it has been really important for me to realize how important a network is and the network of a network. So knowing whom to ask, even if you don't know exactly sometimes what the question is, and being able to reflect jointly with people in your broad network has been really of capital importance. So as you can tell, quite a few topics and quite a few changes from, a big organization. I think your last question, Pamela, was centering around how we would leverage technology. And I think you do that, very similar like big organizations would do. You look at pragmatic ways of incorporating technology in what you do as an organization. And then you take the latest and the greatest from the technological advances and sort of build that into your programs and products. And with that, we are not, I don't think, that different than a bigger pharma organization would do that. An example from just our small organization right now is, you may remember that we spoke about our ongoing phase 3 clinical trial program. The way we have incorporated technology here, also making our trial proof for the COVID and post-COVID environment, where you have much more patients sitting in their homes, is that we have incorporated the transfer of patient data, of endpoint data, in fact, through electronic and cell phone networks. So patients can do, for example, blood pressure monitorings in their in-home setting, and that data gets transferred via cell phone networks, via a normal SIM card, onto the trial databases. That's done first in time for a trial like a hypertension trial, to my understanding. So this is how we pragmatically leverage technology, very, very pragmatic, but certainly also responding to the environmental challenges that we see, not only with the pandemic, but also in terms of what's going on in sort of the broader environment.
I think this is a big innovation in the clinical trial space, and it's fantastic that your organization has the agility to take up that opportunity and also respond to the need of the patient population within clinical trials during the past couple of years. So that's fascinating. I'd actually really love to come back to the second point that you made, and you mentioned the investors and how you work with them. And I'd love to know more a bit about what that shift from big pharma to biotech means in terms of working with your shareholders. What are the differences and the dynamics?
A great question. I think very much to the heart of the differences between bigger organizations where you don't necessarily have that exposure and you don't need to be exposed to all kind of venture capital companies. It is really a core piece. And I think, again, it's centering very much around that many of these small biotech companies, just like ours, usually very much focused around one or maximum two assets. And only over time, they actually build a platform out. But usually it all starts with one idea, one asset. And then you sort of try to prove that we oftentimes internally call that the sausage machine is working. And I say that with a smile. And once you actually make that proof point, the sausage machine is working, you have a platform in your hands suddenly, and you can expand from that. So I think this realization that your investment thesis is built around this one asset means also you have to really execute, as I said, flawlessly. So there is certainly a strategic view in terms of how could that platform look like, but it is not the classic traditional pharma view where you have sort of a therapeutic area strategy and beyond therapeutic areas, you have sort of company strategies. It is very much focused on single assets and ensuring they're successful on their pathway. And that brings me to another point, which is the risk tolerance is much different. I think there's generally an acceptance of certain inherent risks of venture capital companies when working with smaller organizations. And they try to balance that off by understanding that there may not be all the experience in house. So, oftentimes, from what I've been seeing, is VCs look inherently in an opinion from the executive and the management team of an organization, but they also try to bring in other external viewpoints to ensure that the appetite for risk that certainly exists is sort of counterbalanced by other external views. So I think you as an executive team working for a small biotech can always try to bring in that third party external viewpoint. On the last note, I wouldn't assume, when you work in a small sort of company and biotech environment, that all the expertise resides at board level and there's an immediate understanding at either board of director levels or at the VC level. You oftentimes need to spend a significant amount of time to contextualize a pathway, a problem, a challenge, a resource ask, so people really get an understanding in terms of what is it that you're trying to build and why is it important in the current setting and how it compares to other sort of industry standards. It's not like you will encounter immediately the sort of expert level from a subject matter expertise, but you need to really help people get educated around the challenges that you may find. And that is also vastly different when you work with VCs. You need just to take the time to take that step back and help people to reflect in terms of what you're trying to achieve, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And it sounds like an interesting contextual shift that happens between the two. I do have one more question for you, Stefan, and I know that everyone is dying to hear your thoughts on this. But looking ahead, what do you think will be the three key drivers to success for a biotech?
I think the one item you want to really make sure is that you have realistic plans. By realistic plans, I mean something that encompasses and considers, that not everything may work picture perfect. You can't assume when you take a lead of a small biotech then that this company works picture perfect and it runs just like a sports car. I think you have to assume that you are still assembling parts of that car, and some things may break down and you may need some repair parts. So I think it is important that you manage expectations with your shareholders and stakeholders and management teams, and don't always plan for the best case, but you actually take a really realistic stance of things. And this avoids then disappointing people, disappointing investors, disappointing yourself and getting frustrated. I think these realistic plans ensure you're actually able to deliver on a significant track, but it doesn't put any overdue pressure on yourself or the teams. Again, it comes back to an earlier point I made about building confidence. Secondly, I think with any small organization, you need to take a strategic step in terms of seeing, and I spoke about usually small companies, one asset companies or two asset companies, you need to put out a strategy how you venture beyond this just one asset into at least a second or potentially a third asset, just to put another foot on the ground and stand a little bit more stable as an organization. So that's a strategic consideration rather than opportunistic. It may be opportunistic on the same note, but strategically, you just need to find sort of a second pillar, strategic pillar in your business. And then lastly, and I spoke about this, you need to show that the machine is working. You really need to identify what a quick success looks like. And then you don't need to be shy about speaking that and being able to show to people that this is the first sign of that platform that you want to build is actually working. Try to immediately pitch for further resources in order to expand beyond this just one idea. So it's all about building, I guess, a second pillar, and it's showing to people that you can meaningfully deliver on a plan, if that's okay.
Stefan, thank you so much for your insight and perspective. We've covered so many different topics, and I've enjoyed every nugget of insight you've shared, so thank you so much. And just to say, it's been absolutely inspirational working alongside you this past decade, and I'm really excited to see both your and George Medicine's next steps.
Thank you, Pam. It's a pleasure to join you on this series.
And that draws our podcast to a close. So thank you once again, Stefan König. You are leaving us with some very important food for thought.